I made a commitment yesterday that I'm going to write a book in English on Hilchos Gerus, and also, I'll, first of all, the interesting thing is that in Shulchan Aruch, it's a very small simon. It's not much to it. I mean, and it goes to show
Right.
you that it's actually there isn't much to it. It's not what they make out of it, but there are so many tshuvas which there's so much ignorance in this area. I've been dealing with conversions for a long time, for not a long time. I mean, it's been a few years, and I went through a lot of responsa, halachic responsa. I mean, most of the people that have opinions, I mean, it's just like they just don't get it from anywhere. They get it from this, from the air, like we say in Yiddish,
Hmm.
from the Luftrein. So,
Hmm.
so
Would this guide be more for rabbis or for people who are seeking
no,
conversion?
no, it's gonna be. I have figured the title is gonna be V'haftem es Hager, and it's gonna
Hmm.
be different response and also the different the history of how it came about. The situation today. I mean, I'm gonna go through what happened with the Rabbanut and the RCA, and I'm going to talk about the Rogatchover's opinion of what Kabbalah's mitzvahs are, and according to the Rambam, and then there's and then I'm going to go through different stories of what the challenges that
Hmm.
different converts had, and of converting
What does the
and how
Rambam
it
bring
came.
down being a Kabbalah mitzvahs?
No, so actually the famous Rambam and there's is that you do not have to. In other words, lechatchila, you're supposed to part of the
Investigate. Right.
right, yeah. So the best way is what you're supposed to do is to inform the convert of mainly not the mitzvahs, but mainly of the punishment and the consequences of
Hmm.
of being Jewish. In other words, the consequences are huge, and the reward. And then afterwards, the Rambam talks about telling the person, don't discourage the person. Once the person knows the consequence, don't dwell on it. Don't chase the person away.
Hmm.
So tell them what the great reward it is, what a great benefit it is, to be Jewish.
Hmm.
With that, the people forget about all this stuff, and then, but anyway, he says though, if a person did not inform the person, the ger, as long as they converted in front of a bezdin, they went to the mikveh in front of a bezdin. The Rambam holds that every part of the conversion has to be in front of the bezdin, including the circumcision
Hmm.
and the immersion in the mikveh. The Shulchan Aruch. So what is Kabbalah's mitzvah? So the Rugged Shover says that Kabbalah's mitzvahs mean the fact that the tefillah has to be in front the mikveh has to be in front of a bezdin, and the circumcision has to be in front of a bezdin. So that means because the Kabbalah mitzvahs itself is the immersion in the mikveh. In other words, the mere fact that they are going to the mikveh is showing that is the acceptance of the mitzvahs. They don't have to speak it out with their mouth. So, the Shulchan
Yeah,
Aruch
so the way it seems
actually,
to me that
yeah,
because he says miyad, it seems that this is happening so quickly that there isn't time for the Beis Din or the Gimel Hadiotot to disband. In other words, it says that if he accepts us, we accept him miyad. And then it says that we inform him a second time when he's already in the water.
right.
This isn't a 2-year conversion process. This is happening so quick that being
It
that you
happens in
had
one
these
day,
guys. I'm sorry.
immediately, the same day,
For
the
sure,
same day.
miyad. For sure. So this is why it's hard for people to understand, like, why would you need a Beis Din in the mikvah? Now, it's because it's happening on the same day. So nowadays, conversion takes years, and people completely misunderstand it. I mean, by a simple fact that he says that we inform him a second time when he's already in the water, that means that you're just having a meeting with him every year. I mean, it's so backwards nowadays. But then
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, but he goes
someone has
further. He
been studying
says
for years.
that we tell them, because the practice nowadays is to tell someone who comes to convert that why do you want to convert? when he could be considered one of the Chasidei Umat Ha'olam by keeping the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. He doesn't
It
say
never
to say
says
that.
anything like that. It never says anything
For sure.
like that in Shulchan Aruch or in Rambam. Or...
Absolutely, because it's quoting Yevamos, and the Rambam is quoting Yevamos, and Shulchan Aruch is quoting the Rambam, right? And it says that we tell him the opposite. We tell him that only Israel has a share to encourage him. I'm not saying the Rambam believe this. The job as a Rambam, as a codifier, is to bring down different opinions. So he's quoting like Rabbi Eliezer here, but in Hilchos Malachim and Hilchos Tshuva, he's bringing down other opinions that maybe if he keeps 7 laws, they'll be considered one of the Chasidei Umat Ha'olam. So
by
you're
the way,
absolutely right.
There's a few major contradictions in the Rambam over here. One of them bothered me for a long time, and I think something that you said, I think, is the truth over here. I think, bothered me a long time is in Hilchos Malachim, the Rambam says that that a non-Jew that wants to keep any of the commandments to receive schar, which is an interesting thing in the first place, that we're supposed to do mitzvahs to get schar. I don't know, but there's a few times it mentions something like that. Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So there's English speakers. Because the schar means reward. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's not, there's a few instances in the Talmud where it says that they did something to receive a reward, and I don't know if it actually means reward, like you get a reward, or it means schar mitzvah means the reward of a mitzvah is having the actual mitzvah itself. For instance, you find that that they would go to a place where they were able to stand, where the rabbis were convening, and they'll get schar, they'll get reward on just standing up for every time the rabbi walks by. So what does that mean? Why we're not supposed to do things for reward? But yeah, I guess it means that just the actual having, you're just standing up for a Torah scholar, you actually get, you become a greater person. So
I don't think they mean. I don't think they mean schar ve'onesh in terms of the like Beis Din Agadol, but more like with the Beis Din Shomala. That God Himself is going to reward you because you're choosing to do more. Right? This is why Hilchos Malachim is not a halacha sefer. It's a sefer that really deals with Yemas Mashiach, if anything. So people shouldn't walk around quoting it like it's halacha. The Rambam is
the Rambam had all the Torah, including including when the Mashiach comes, so he everything in the Torah is in the Rambam. Things that we don't do today are in the Rambam.
For sure. This is why it's more important to really study Mishneh Torah than Shulchan Aruch, because it covers everything. I mean, even the Rif didn't cover anything. I mean, the Rif is just Talmud Bavli. So this is why I encourage people.
The contradiction is that he says that, I'm trying to remember the exact place, but he says that, in other words, Goysha Shavas Chai Misa. We say that a Gentile that
that's the 10th chapter of Hilchos Malachim, right?
It's also Malachim. So the Rambam explains
Malachim, chapter 10.
The Rambam explains what that means. This is saying that a Gentile cannot create their own religion. So if they're doing it, so keeping us the Sabbath. But he says an interesting thing. He says either they convert or they just keep the 7 commandments. They have to make a choice, and so what does that mean? So in one case he says that a Gentile that can keep any of the mitzvahs, and the other hand he says that no, they're not allowed. That's called creating their own religion. Mm-hmm. Maybe yeah, go ahead.
Why they're doing it? In other words, if they're doing it out of spite, i.e., not doing it how Chazal teach, because he writes also like in the first parak of Hilchos Mamrim, he says that anyone who believes that the Torah is true and that Moshe Rabbeinu, that his words are correct, they're also bound to keep the rulings of the court because that Torah endorses the same rulings. He writes elsewhere, like in Hilchos Malachim in the 8th chapter, he says that the Torah is the inheritance of Yaakov and anyone who wants to convert. So we're dealing with people who are trying to use the mitzvot to deviate from how they're laid out in the Chumash. In other words, people who are trying to create their own religion. This is why the Rambam writes in a tshuva that it's mutter to teach Torah to Notrim to draw them to our religion.
Right. That's amazing. Amazing.
But then he says that we shouldn't do it to Muslims because they're almost going to use it against us.
Right.
So he's
Which
against.
is interesting because everybody says that Muslims. I used to always think, well, Muslims are better than Christians because they believe in one God. Where Christians they have a Trinity, which is considered for sure idol worship. There's no question about it.
Right. So it shows that the Rambam, although the Rambam considers Christianity avodah zarah and Islam not, it seems that he feels more at home around Christians than around Muslims.
Which is an interesting point because I'm involved with a convert right now, and every Christian convert tells me the same thing. Said, what made you want to convert? And the interesting thing is, they got it from the Torah. They said, look, he says, our Bible says, we have the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, and it says that God appeared to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, and this is the source, and everybody believes that. So of course, then we're going to believe in the Torah. And you know what? And it started to make me think, God judges everybody according to their ability. In other words, if you're on the other side of the world and you never heard of Jewish people, you're, I don't know, in the Far East, maybe in, I don't know, someplace, maybe you never heard of a Jewish person. You're in India, you're in the mountains, and you never heard of Jewish people. And so God is going to judge you accordingly that, you weren't able to find out about it. But the Christians that read it every day, but they read the Torah. So there's much less of an excuse. Because the Torah, you're reading the Torah that God appeared to millions of people and gave us the Torah, and so you don't have an excuse anymore. And many Christians have told me that who converted that, we read it in the Bible, and everything that we read in the New Testament is actually a contradiction.
No, that's interesting. It sounds, pretty much what I've been saying all along, that if someone's coming from a serious belief system, like Christianity, like Islam, that the Noahide system is not a good alternative for them. They have to go from their level to a higher level, because keeping less mitzvot is going from a higher level to a lower level. Right, because I'm not against the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. Clearly you have to be able to walk before you can run. And prehistoric men couldn't even rationalize notions like ethical monotheism. And the Rambam speaks like this. I don't know if it's in More Nevuchim, but he talks about, and this is something that's used against him, but it doesn't really mean he's a racist. He says Kushim, but he also says Turks, that they're not able to comprehend notions like monotheism. Basically, Ethiopians and people in a certain part of Turkey. So even back then, they were people who clearly weren't candidates to convert, right? But I think that the average Orthodox Jew typically doesn't speak to people who disagree with him much. So they think that Christians, Messianics, are primitives. I remember before I converted around 23 years ago, that the rabbi asked me, and I first went to a Sephardi synagogue. So Israeli rabbis are the worst because they're so disconnected because they come from a bubble. So he asked me how many of my siblings were married to each other and if we ever married one of our parents or something silly like that. And I'm like, have you ever spoken to a Gentile before? And it's just, it's this huge disconnect. They think that every Christian is an anti-Semite. They just don't know. Especially like if you're Israeli, like if you're an American, you don't know. Huh?
Well, but rightfully, but the truth is that they are a little worried about missionaries. And rightfully so. There's a terrible epidemic in Israel with missionaries. Terrible epidemic. It's getting worse and worse. It used to be when the state was first came about. There were no Jews that believed in Christianity, and maybe one or two. And now there's so many. Unfortunately, it's a terrible epidemic.
Right, and the Christianity they believe in is typically not Messianic Judaism, just straight Christianity. And they're just like Russians who weren't really Jewish to begin with in many cases, or just secular Jews who in Israel, it's very common for them to open up like places to play chess, because old people love playing chess, and they'll say you're welcome here to play chess and hang out with other old Jews as long as you hear the gospel. Yeah, but the thing is, I prefer a secular Jew, if he's not going to come to Torah, to at least adopt some ethical religion out there. I mean, the Rambam gave Christianity its proper due ethically. It says that this was an ethical force in bringing the world at least closer to the understanding of Torah and Mashiach and all these concepts that we hold dear.
Well, the way I look at that is that more people are talking about the Torah. I mean, because they read the Torah. I mean, but not that it's not idol worship. I mean, there's no question that Christianity is idol worship according to everybody. I mean,
yeah, but is kafira worse than avodah zarah?
That's been an old question. I don't know what the answer is.
So I think the general understanding is that kafira is worse. Now, clearly, avodah zarah is a form of kafira, right? But
right.
Kafir is understood nowadays as like straight atheism, to deny the existence of God. I think that the Rambam felt that Christians were so much there that they just needed a little nudge in the right direction. That's it. Although he classified it as idolatry. Now, I'm of the opinion that Islam is idolatry, although Messianic Judaism is not idolatry.
It is. By the way, there's a stira, a contradiction of the Rambam there also, because in one instance the Rambam calls it like similar to idolatry, but he doesn't. In other words, he doesn't. I don't know if he uses the word idolatry, but they're not allowed to do it. They're definitely not allowed to have their own religion. But on the other hand, he said it's not idolatry, and it's not a contradiction, because one. Put it this way: the God that they're, if you say that their prayers are not to another God, but no, their prayers are to God, but their religion is they're praying to one God.
Yeah, but you could pray to one God and it could still be a foreign God. I mean, you could pray to a turtle or a rabbit, and it's still
no. But if you're praying to a turtle. No, if you're praying to a turtle and then you're praying to an object, we're talking about they're praying to the God that's
celestial turtle then, or a celestial rabbit. In other words, yes, it's monotheistic. Something could be monotheistic and still technically be avodah zarah.
By the way, they use the same word. They use the same word for God as that we use. Eloah is in Tehillim, Lifnei Eloah Yaakov.
For sure. Only because they use the same word doesn't mean anything.
No. But if they're referring to the God that can't be seen, that's infinite, that's spiritual, there's no reason to say that it's a different God. Why is it a different God? The only thing is
because it's a different Torah.
It's a different Torah, right? By the way, you can make God into an avodah zarah. It says right after the 10 Commandments. It says, which is not really like 10 Commandments, 10 statements. It says, "Lo sasun iti Elohei kesef Elohei zov." So Mizbach Adoma Taslochem. A lot of Hasidic thought on this is from the Ishbitzer. He says that don't make God into an avodah zarah.
Oh, that's
Hashem. You could.
I mean, not making him into gold or silver or like worship gods in terms of the second statement. And this is commentary. I mean, to say that you could worship the God of Israel.
But first of all, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says is an interesting thing. He says, don't make 3 kruvim. Why would a person want to make 3 kruvim? First of all, you know what I think? I think that, why is he using 3 kruvim? I think he's referring to the Trinity, actually. But what's the thing about 3 kruvim? In other words, don't add to the Torah. When you add to the Torah, it's like avodah zarah. And
sure,
also,
that's what the Maharshal says. It has to be a Baal Tosif, is to be an avodah zarah. But that's going back to the original definition of the word. I mean, avodah zarah just means foreign service. It doesn't mean like
avodat where do you have zarah in the Torah, which is not of anaviyu. It says they brought an eish zarah. They brought a foreign.
Right.
So,
this means that Islam could be monotheistic and still be foreign in terms of service, because it's telling you that their God requires something different. Right. So this is the understanding of David Bar Chaim also. Now, really, the Rambam was a das yach in this, because the Ran, and it seems that the consensus back then was that Islam was idolatry. The Rambam was the
So
first
maybe
one to
they're
say
not
no, it wasn't.
arguing. I'm saying maybe in other words, you can go into their temple to let's say as a tourist, maybe because they're not praying to a foreign
Yeah,
god,
that's
but
what the
their
Rambam
service is a
says.
foreign service.
Yeah, the Rambam
Yeah,
invented this whole notion of being able to daven in a mosque. No one else says this. I mean, the Rambam was an innovator for sure.
right.
Now,
No, but maybe you could daven in a mosque, but their service, the things that they do, could still be considered like avodah zarah. In other words, the fact that even they keep the Sabbath on Friday or whatever, they keep a Sabbath.
yeah,
Somebody said very
way.
interesting, and he said it from Rav
Yeah,
Chaim
but the halacha
Soloveitchik.
is not to go into a base of avodah zarah. It has nothing to do with praying in a mosque or nothing. A base of avodah zarah doesn't mean it's
Yeah, but they're not doing avodah zarah in the mosque. In other words,
Why
the fact that they have their own religion is nothing. Their mosque is only there to pray to God, but their praying to God is not avodah zarah. Praying to their prayers are not avodah zarah, but their service is avodah zarah. In other words, the fact that a prophet came and said, "I spoke to God," and he said this to do this and this and this, that's avodah zarah.
Well, it's a machloket that prayer is from the Torah to begin with. If it's rabbinic and you're not obligated to pray, then it technically is not avodah zarah. But if you go and throw a stone at a statue, like Masechet Sanhedrin says that you worship Markulus like this, right? I mean, that clearly means that at least what they do in the Hajj and like what the Shiites do with cutting their heads for Ali, i.e. for the dead, that is avodah zarah. But the Rambam didn't mention that.
But what I'm saying is that it's possible that their prayers would be to God. The prayer itself is to God, but the services, the things that that the prophet said, that their false prophet said to do, that's avodah zarah. In other words, you can make a distinction. You could say,
right. So the religion is still overall, it's still avodah zarah. It's a different avodah zarah. Even Chazal say that the idolatry of their days was different than the idolatry of like Baal Peor. It's clearly in a different level. Now, Christianity, at least according to Tosfos and the students of Rashi, is more what's called Shituf, which is another category. But according to Ashkenazim, Christianity is not idolatry, which goes against the Rambam. I mean, suddenly.
Well, by the way, that's a very big mistake as far as I know, and I have to thank Rav Tuvia Singer for setting me straight in this. I mean, I didn't speak to him directly, but I heard it from his video, and I agree with him 100% on this. I don't agree with everything he says, but on this one, he, especially what he says about Islam. But I agree with him on this one, that Shituf really is worse. The worst type of avodah zarah is Shituf, because it says in the Torah, and it's an open pasuk in the Torah. It says, what's that? The Ten Commandments. It says, Nochi Hashem Elokecha Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. You should not have other gods together with me. In other words, really the main prohibition of avodah zarah is worshiping God together with another. Why? It's worse.
Yeah, that's not how Tosfos got it. Tosfos said that it's not avodah zarah for non-Jews, but it is avodah zarah for Jews.
This is a Tosfos?
No, for sure. This is how Tosfos. The whole notion of Shituf, I don't even think Shituf is brought down by Chazal. Tosfos brings it up, and he says that a ben or bat Noach is not chayav in the Isser of Shituf. But that as long as they're worshiping the God of Israel, that he could have partners. But it is for a Jew.
See, I didn't see that Tosfos. By the way, I was looking at Hilchos Shtaros. Hilchos Shtaros is a question if they're not Shtaros but a Shvua. If they swear in a court by, let's say, by both Yashka and God. In other words, they're Trinity. They swear in the name of the Trinity. So, question is that considered, just because they put God in there, is that considered a good Shavua, or since they swore in the name of avodah zarah? That's the one I know. I didn't know that Tosfos. Okay, all right. I'll look it up.
Yeah, but I agree that Christianity, traditional Christianity, and for sure Catholicism, which would have been the Christianity at the time of the Rambam, is for sure avodah zarah. But I made a video excusing Messianics because if the understanding, and I'm not even convinced that Catholics view it like this, but if you view JC and their version of the Holy Spirit as a completely separate entity, almost like the Mormons do, that's for sure avodah zarah, and that's the classic definition of Shituf. But if you believe just like Chabad teaches, that a Rebbe is the Atzmut in a goof, i.e., with that JC is just an earthly representation of the God of Israel, that is foolish according to Mor Nevuchim, to everything the Rambam taught us philosophically, but it's not technically Avodah Zarah. This is why I don't consider Lubavitchers, Elokistim, idolaters, although I consider them foolish.
Right. A lot of the things, the Messianic Chabad, I mean, I also say that they're foolish, but not apocryphal. You know? So
someone believes that God took on a bodily form, contrary to what the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva. Mind you, the Ravid challenges them on, saying, because the Rambam says that anyone who believes that God is corporeal has no chelik in Olam Haba. So the Ravid says, how could you say this when rabbis greater than you believe that God had a body and a shape? I mean, not Basar V'Dam, but just, mamish a shape. Tosfos is big on believing God also has a body and a shape. Only because you believe that God embodied.
I think it's misunderstood. It's very hard to picture these things, because it's very hard to really, that God is above time and space. It's very hard to imagine that. But by the way,
that's the Rambam's understanding. I mean, Chazal were corporeal all the way.
By the way, modern science proves. I mean, starting from you're talking about quantum mechanics, that even the physical world doesn't really have time and space.
Oh, fine.
In other words, there could be two atoms in the same spot.
All these modern developments don't affect my view of halakha and
no, well, in a lot of ways,
life and practice.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting because it basically shows people that they don't really have an understanding of physics. I mean, and there's so much spirituality to physics. Mm-hmm. In other words, right. The spiritual and the physical are really intertwined, and our just the way the Torah says that what you think affects the whole world, affects the universe. If you think bad thoughts, you create people you create angels, but angels only are spiritual beings. They're energy. It's energy. You create bad energy in the world. By everything you do an avera, you do a mitzvah, you create good energy or bad energy, and it affects the whole world. The Torah teaches us that. So science actually has proven it. And science proves that now.
I mean, I'm more practical. I'm more of a Nigla versus a Nestor type person. But
what I'm saying is that this is mamish. This is basic Torah. That what you do affects the world.
Oh, for sure. I think more on a practical level than a metaphysical one. But I agree. It's a net gain if there's more people keeping mitzvot, and a net loss if there's more people adhering to 7 laws. But regarding Tovia Singer, I think the problem with his classes is that they're geared more against traditional Christians and Catholics than the average Messianic Jew who holds a more sophisticated understanding of God, Torah, and Judaism than the average Christian does. And that's typically the Christian who would listen to my work. Our people are Hebrew rooters or whatever you want to call them who keep and accept Torah Shebiktav and Torah Shebal Peh, but I happen to believe that one JC is Mashiach and possibly an earthly incarnation of the God of Israel, which is clearly against the Rambam, but is not against the Chumash nor Chazal, because they never mention it. I mean, Chazal talk about God wearing tefillin and God wearing whatever. I clearly don't endorse people to become Messianic, but I would accept the Messianic who views Torah like that, like a brother and a sister, and if they converted to Judaism or if they had a Jewish mother, I would count them in a minion. I'd
be worried though to accept them because they can proselytize and it could be very.
I'll tell dangerous. You, I have more in common with them than I do with the average Lubavitcher.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into all that,
No, this is the meat. This is what people want to hear. I believe that they're eventually going to come to my way of thinking, but even if they don't, as long as they keep Torah mitzvahs and they don't violate halakha, that's really the test.
They don't believe these messianics. They don't believe that JC is God.
No, some don't, but some do. But if they believe that he's an earthly representation of God, like I said, the Chabad teaches that a Rebbe is the divine essence in bodily form, the Atzmut in a goof.
They don't mean it literally.
Come on, man. I mean, they mean it. They're more metaphysical than the average Christians. I mean, they live in a metaphysical world. I mean, they don't take responsibility for their statements because they believe the Rebbe's got their back in the physical and the spiritual. Because they believe the Rebbe is still alive. Right? I see them more of a threat than a messianic who loves the Jewish people and doesn't separate the world between Jew and non-Jew, but between the decent and the indecent. Right? But I am in the business of saying that what's good for me is good for these messianics, and I want them to drop the New Testament, and I want them to drop JC. But I think that the tactic should be one of love and inclusion instead of just pushing away and calling them names. So that's more my approach. And that is contrary to the Tovia Singer approach. And I also disagree with Tovia Singer's view on Islam.
Well, Tovia Singer started as anti-missionary.
I mean, he's still an anti-missionary. I mean, that's all he does.
Right.
I mean, I respect the guy. I mean, for sure, but I don't appreciate his view on Islam or his view on Noidism. The Lubavitcher Rebbe that really spearheaded this movement in the 60s, and everyone is riding his coattails. I mean, because Chazal...
Yeah, but look, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was a great man, yeah.
He wasn't a bad man. At my yeshiva, there was a big picture of Rav Shach in the dining room to almost remind us, Panovich. The Lubavitcher Rebbe never did anything for someone who wasn't born Jewish. The whole spearheading of the Noahide movement was because it played into Messianism, and this is why they ran with it. I'm not saying that he's a bad person, but that's not how I gauge the most righteous person in our generation, which is typically the statement said by Lubavitchers.
Nobody did that. Nobody did that ever. Nobody went after non-Jews. I mean, there's many reasons for it. You would get your head chopped off.
Well, that's not true. I mean, Chazal did. I mean, there's statements in Josephus. There's in
the time of the Gemara.
Right, for sure. And then Hadrian outlawed it. But the problem I have with Chabad is when they walk around, even in Congress, saying that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was the most righteous man in our generation. In other words, he's still alive today in their mind. Now, he could be a good man, but you're telling me like he's bigger than a Rav Grossman. Are you familiar with the Disco Rebbe?
Who?
The Disco Rebbe?
No.
Well, look him up. Did some work in Israel for Migdal Or. So this is a story of a guy who would go into discotheques in Israel and bring out, Artzim and Chilunim and bring them back to Torah. Clearly, this guy didn't do anything for
that. I'm talking about though his knowledge on Torah is unbelievable. His knowledge of everything.
Oh yeah, but that doesn't make you a righteous person. And I mean, righteous means that you're actually physically doing good. And I believe he did good for the Jewish people. But you're telling me
I'm talking about his scholarship is unbelievable. But that's what impresses me a lot. Right. I mean, first of all, your knowledge of Torah, I mean, is and Rabbi Asher Feinstein, I mean, is the same.
For sure, like all the Gedolim. The Rabbi Elyashiv, Rav Avadi Yosef was a walking encyclopedia. Fine, but that doesn't make you righteous.
Well, but it helps.
I don't think so. You can be very knowledgeable. I think the Ramban says that someone could master Torah in and out and still be a piece of crap. In other words,
you can be, of course.
What's your view on Moshe Feinstein? What's your view on Moshe Feinstein?
He was a posech halakha. Anyone who goes to a young Israel most likely has a rabbi who was a student of Rav Moshe. His Ageret Moshe. I mean, he's not. These guys aren't bringing anything new to the table. With the exception, I remember.
Well, he was very different than everybody else. He was
he pushed the notion that one shouldn't listen to music, which is kind of controversial, but that's the actual halakha.
No, I'm not even talking about the controversial stuff. I'm talking about the fact that a lot of people, there were those that opposed Rav Moshe Feinstein because they couldn't understand. Rav Moshe Feinstein paskin directly from the Gemara. He had such a knowledge. He was the one in a generation. I mean, he had such a complete knowledge of the Torah. He had no problems arguing with the Chassam Sofer or or any previous generations of the early Achronim.
It was like this.
Yeah. And let me tell you, the Rambam, you talk about the Rambam, what protects you from an Avera? What is going to protect you? You go out into the street and you look at the filth in the street. The only thing that protects you is not only the Torah, but to be involved in the Torah in the discourse of Torah, and to the fight, the Melchamta shel Torah, the fight of Torah. When you're involved in Torah, that's the only thing that's going to protect you from the outside world. From the
Yetzer Hara. Being righteous is more than just being protected, but being active and making the world a better place. I honestly don't think. Yeah. Here, look, I think that someone like Mother Teresa, and I know it sounds kind of funny for everyone listening for me to even mention her, right? But someone on that level of righteousness, holding on to a baby as it breathes its last breath in this world, not caring if that baby is black, white, Asian, Jewish, that is being righteous. This is something that's never discussed nowadays. That we think that someone's great because he takes care of the Jewish people. Well, you know what? Even monsters love their children. So let's talk plainly. On that level of caring, I don't know of a Gadol. I mean, I could talk about. That reaches that level. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, great minds. But being an academic doesn't really align always with being a true tzaddik. And I think that maybe that's up to us nowadays. Now we have the ability to do this because it's true. Back then they couldn't do it, right? 500 years ago, you had to stay in your little community. You couldn't proselytize. You couldn't reach out and help you. You'd be killed. But now we shouldn't take this opportunity for granted and still be insular and still continue to separate the world between Jew and non-Jew instead of the ethical and the unethical. This is why it frustrates me when I see Chabad in the corner asking people, are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Instead of saying, do you want Torah? Do you want to hear more about the God of Israel? It sounds more like of a Christian approach, but I think that we shouldn't be shy to align ourselves with even our enemies when they're doing the right thing. All right. So that's...
let me ask you a question. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say to proselytize.
Right.
If you take a look at the Shulchan Aruch, it says Ger haba as Lizgayer. He comes to us to convert.
Sure.
But we don't go to them.
Fine.
So
I'm not saying it's a chiyuv. There's a lot of things we do that is not an obligation. For example, I'm sure that you love your wife, correct? Now, there's no halakha, there's no chovah that tells you to love your wife. But we know that it's the right thing to do. And mind you, the Rambam does bring it down in Sefer HaMitzvot. In the third mitzvah, the mitzvah of loving Hashem, he says the way that you love Hashem is by doing what Avram Avinu did in Haran. And all the Meforshim teach that he converted the men and Sarah converted the women. And he said that he loved God so much that he wanted to make God loved by everybody else. And he shared with them what he had. In other words, you can't separate the two. When someone says, oh, well, it's our job to teach ethical monotheism. Well, ethical means law, and monotheism is the worship of the one God. So how can you separate the Taryag mitzvot from the God of Israel? And the Taryag mitzvot requires you to listen to the Sanhedrin. It requires you to circumcise yourself. We have a mitzvah of Yeshivat Yisrael to build up Israel.
We never proselytized. No, but maybe even
no, but you agreed that the Tanaim did proselytize.
I don't know.
Right,
it's not very clear.
Josephus, it says. All right.
What did he say? They actually proselytized to convert to Judaism?
For sure. What it doesn't say that in Perkei Avot? In the beginning of Perkei Avot, it says to be like the sons of Aaron and bring the whole world to Torah. Now, what does that mean?
No, it doesn't say the whole world.
It says the whole world.
The Jewish people.
Nope. Here, look it up.
It doesn't say specifically the whole world.
It says the whole world. It says all of humanity. It doesn't say the Jewish people. This is why.
It doesn't say those words. It says Makarvan La Torah. Always Abrias. But it's
right. Look, all of creation. You said it better. Bria. All of creation. Bring all of creation to Torah.
I don't think I don't think he means literally. But by the way, first of all, it's not necessarily that it means literally, and a lot of things aren't literal. But besides that, Korban La Torah is what a goy has to keep. Not 7 mitzvahs, by the way. Goy has to keep a lot more. Actually, there's about 50 mitzvahs that a goy has to keep.
Well, there's different opinions. Nobody knows exactly what a ger toshav keeps. Yeah, but even during Hakel, right? During Hakel, the Ibn Ezra says clearly that the reason whether we bring goyim to the forefront is that they should be encouraged to want to become Jewish. I'm not saying go to door like a Mormon or a J Witness, but just having an open door policy. Sure.
I start with just like Avram Avinu. One thing Avram Avinu did was when he gave food out, he asked them to make a bracha. So I always say to that there are non-Jews that are studying. Let's say they want to convert, and they say, well, they're learning about Shabbos. First of all, I said Shabbos is not the most important thing for you, because a Gentile, everybody says, has to make brachos. So brachos is the most important thing. I mean,
no, wait. I mean, who says the Gentiles have to make brachos?
But you see,
I mean, it says
Avram
Birkas
Avinu,
Hashem.
first of all.
I mean, one of the Sheva mitzvahs is Birkas Hashem,
No,
i.e., not to
Birkas
curse
Hashem,
God.
that's the opposite. That's
Right. But the opposite is not to curse
part
God.
Part of
Yeah, that's a
faith in
medrash.
God is to pray to Him and to make a
Wait,
bracha.
hold on. There is no law within the 7 laws, at least, to even believe in Hashem.
But it's included.
I mean, it's not included. Come on, it's a Avodah
They
Zorah.
have to believe in Hashem. And they have to believe in the Torah.
What? Oh no, but that's to be considered one of the Chasidei Umat Ha'olam, but that's different from being a regular Ger Toshav, right? If you want a Chelik Olam Haba, then you have to do X. But a traditional Ger Toshav
That's what I mean. Ger Toshav, we're not going to kill the person. We're not going to kill him. But otherwise we would. There's capital punishment if they don't keep the 7 mitzvahs. But they have to. But
I think it's the right thing to do. It's so sensical, it's so rational to do it that Chazal didn't even have to mention it, because it's so clear that there's strength in numbers, and
Well, most of the exile, we weren't involved in conversion. We would have been killed
because we weren't able. Correct.
Right.
But to say that it wasn't a net gain to the Jewish people to bring in Gentiles, I think is something that you have to be taught, because common sense doesn't teach that. I mean, common sense. I mean, honestly, wouldn't you want? I assume you're in upstate, right? The upstate New York, or you're in New York, right?
No, I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay, fine, same thing. You wouldn't want every one of your Black and Puerto Rican neighbors and Asian neighbors to come to a pure, proper understanding of Torah mitzvahs and worship God in the proper manner. You wouldn't want that?
Well, it's definitely what God intended. Well, we say God intended something different in the beginning and the end, but what God intended when He created the world, it says B'shvil Yisrael shenikra reishis, and it's not talking about us specifically, because at that time when Hashem created the world, He wanted everybody to keep the Torah. There's no question about it.
I think even on Har Sinai, He wanted everyone to keep the Torah, because all teach that even the vast majority of people who stood in Har Sinai were the heir of Rav, that they outnumbered the Hebrews. And he still says in Parshat Re'eh,
the Gemara and the Medrash have 2 different versions of the story of the
heir of Rav.
There were prophets being sent. No, prophets are being sent to the nations to accept the Torah, and they refused. There's 2 different versions of the story.
That's a Medrash.
No, one is a Medrash, and one is in the Masechtas Avodah Zarah.
Right, so it's still a Medrash.
A
Medrash is anything. Yeah, no, for sure. But a Medrash, I think, is typically understood as anything by Chazal that's not legal. I mean, it's a Gadata. Fine.
We have, by the way, there's a principle called Ein Lamedem Halacha Mimaisa, which Maisa could also mean, any agada that. Good. We're not learning halacha, and I always say this to the Satmar. We say that that the Hashem made us swear 3 shvuas, Gimel shvuas. I said, where does it say? This is not halacha. This is a Maisa.
Yeah, but the reason I also agree with the 3 oaths is that how do we know when Agadah is actually binding? Only when it's reiterating a Torah principle. Because I consider myself more of a non-Zionist. I assume that's where you're alluding to.
I'm not
mentioning the 3 oaths.
I'm not a Zionist that way, but
no, but the 3 oaths is that one, that we shouldn't war against the nations of the world and go up to Yerushalayim, but like Rashi says, as a wall, whatever. But I figure you live in Williamsburg?
No, in Borough Park.
I mean, there's more Satmar in Williamsburg than in Borough Park. I mean, I daven in the Rav Zalman Leib Shul when I was there. I mean, I actually met the Satmar Rav because I spent a Shabbos in Monroe.
In Monroe?
Yeah, and I met all the new visitors. Always meet the Satmar Rav there in Kiryas Joel. So I could say I met I
not the old. You met Rav Yoel.
Rav Aaron Teitelman, not Rav Yoel. I mean, I'm only 41. I'm not that old.
Okay.
But yeah, no. One of my best friends, is a Satmar Chassid, and he.
Are you talking about Kolakowski?
Yeah. I mean, he's not fully Satmar. I say it. To people who don't know, but like he's in the Satmar Welt.
He's like the full-fledged.
Yeah, I mean he's been in it long enough. But anyways,
Yeah, I did a conversion with him.
oh, you did? Oh, that's great.
I wasn't one of the Dayanim. I had a reason. The reason I wasn't one of the Dayanim is because people were talking. There was this girl from now she's married. She lives in Borough Park. They just made a bris.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
But because people were saying things that I wasn't. The reason I brought her was for personal reasons, that I was interested in her and this and that. So I didn't want to be on the bezin because why should people talk? So, but she had a very good bezin. There was a Rav Harfinis. He's also dying in Satmar, but he's a very big Talmid Chacham, and I became very close to him since then.
So where'd you learn?
I learned in Detroit many years ago. Rav Lev Box, he was my Rebbe. He learned in the Mir Yeshiva. He was
you know
also
Rabbi Shmuel Irons.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, big fan of his.
Yeah, he's So you learned in Eish Torah?
Eish, I was an Eish and an Or Sameach. Yeah.
So who married the one who married one of my cousins, Rabbi Alon Tolwin.
I mean, I was there when Rav Noach was there. I mean, my Rebbe was Rabbi Asher
Meza. He was there
Meza.
when Rav Noach was there. Actually, he was not a Baal Tshuva at all, and he just wanted to do more with his learning than just learn in yeshiva like everybody else. He wanted to do. He didn't feel fulfilled, So somebody told him he should meet Rav Noach Weinberg. And he went to meet him, and he fell in love, and love at first sight. And he learned with Rav Noach, and he went. He was very involved in Eish Torah, and he has Eish Torah in Detroit, and together with his son. The thing is, he went around with Rav Noach Weinberg. He went into the Abu Chatzera, and the Abu Chatzera grabbed Rav Noach Weinberg's hand. And he said, "I'm not letting you leave till you give me a bracha." He right away saw. He didn't even know who he was when he came in. He saw on his face. He says, "This is a great tzaddik."
I mean, I stumbled on Eish. It wasn't my initial choice. I converted. So as a convert, it's hard to find a yeshiva in Israel because they're geared. A convert is very devout, but he doesn't know anything. While places like Eish and Or Sameach are more for like birthright kids, traveling to Israel, who don't care to be religious and have to be coerced or bribed, to be religious. Sure. So, like, what are they going to do with a guy who wears a black hat, who's so devout but doesn't know anything? So Eish took me in, and I was so happy because one, it had the best food. Two, it was right next to the hotel.
Yeah.
Right. But I was a lot more observant than the people there, even though I didn't really know much. But then
Rav Noach Weinberg, he was a great Talmid Chacham there.
For sure. I mean, we only really saw him. I mean, I think during Mishmar and right before. I mean, just Thursdays, right? I mean, that's when he gave. Sure, before people went to Ben Yehuda and got drunk. But that's where I met Jeff Seidel, and I worked for Jeff Seidel for 5 years. I was a Makarv in Hebrew U. And I was the guy who'd walk people to Machlis every week, and I mean, I really became a part of the Old City crowd.
Wow!
And it's an amazing world, especially when you're single. When you're married, it's a little hard because you have to, make a living, right? But just to go from Shabbos table to Shabbos table, I was there when Reb Chaim was there. I don't know, like if you ever met Reb Chaim of Yerushalayim before he was nifter. So he would have these huge. So he was.
Which
no. I mean, he was a nephew of the Nickelsberger Rebbe, right? Okay. But he would have these big, Shabbatons. Yeah, it's the Old City crowd. It's just like a different world, especially Shabbos in Yerushalayim. This is why I encourage people that after they convert to go to Israel, and also in terms of like when you're looking for a wife, it sort of levels the playing field. But then I got married and things, became more normal. But cool, man. I'm a very big fan of Rav Herschel Schechter. A very big fan. I mean, I'm not that close with him, but
I intend to go speak with him, about these. First of all, I this whole thing about using a ger on the Besdin, and just
Right.
it's a little weird to me. I mean, with
So,
all due respect to him, I mean,
but the reason I'm mentioning it for those listening is that he's related to him. I mean, that's his cousin.
yeah.
So Rav Herschel Schechter is a Rosh Hashiva, one of the Rosh Hashivas at YU. He's a posek, I think, also for the OU, and he's a big Kanaker, right? I'm also a big fan
And by
of
the
him.
way, I'm on this group on Facebook now called Techeles.
Right. I'm in it also.
Oh yeah.
Remember, I mentioned that Rav Herschel Schechter is big on Techelet. Like, why
okay.
didn't you feel like
Yeah.
it was an actual chova? Right. So, I mean, he's, him and Rabbi Willig are sort of like polar opposites. I'm a big fan of Rav Arn Rekefet as well. I'm not sure like if you're familiar with the rock. I always gear people towards YU Torah just because, I mean, I identify more with modern Orthodoxy, right? I mean, doing what's required and considering what's optional. That's more my approach. Even though
you have to know that Torah is also, nobody could say, and I always say this and I say not just the ones that follow Nigla, but I'm talking about there are people like from the conservative world that say, kosher was, or especially the reform world, that say kosher was because it was healthy in those days, but today, it's all about health. I said you got to be stupid to believe that the Torah that is so shallow. The mitzvah has so much depth to it that it's only because of health. I mean, there are a lot of things that aren't healthy even if they're not in the Torah. So of course you're supposed to guard your health, but the fact that treif, what the Torah talks about, so
have you seen a latka? I mean, you see,
yeah, right,
with
exactly.
Jews eat cholent. It's not very. I mean, they say that you don't gain weight on Shabbos, but
well, I don't see that either, right?
No, I hear you. I mean, I'm not for watering down Judaism at all, and many people try to paint me in some sort of liberal corner. I'm very right wing. Right, and I see that many people who consider themselves ultra orthodox actually do a lot of the watering down. Right, I mean they're not teaching Torah, from the Divrei Sofrim. I mean,
right. I mean, yeah, but the thing is, you walk in. Look, so many people. I know so many people. There was somebody that was dating a Chinese girl, and he wanted her to convert. But
there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, but he was bringing her to these modern Orthodox shuls, and let me tell you, I don't know. I'm a chazan, so to me the davening, I bring out the davening, I interpret the davening. It's emotional. The davening is, I could relate to a davening in Bavav a lot more than in Young Israel. To me, it's sometimes so shallow. People are they're talking about their business deals. It just doesn't feel spiritual. It doesn't feel like a real experience, and I'm sorry. So
like, are you familiar with Ramosha Weinberger?
No.
Aish Kodesh.
Oh yeah, that.
So Woodmere. So he has this policy that in order to be in a shul, you have to sign like a piece of paper that you're not going to talk. I'm so into like shuls to talk. I'm Kiddush Club all the way. But let's socialize. I mean, I think that we talk to God daily.
But here's the thing. I mean, the ambiance. We're not. I say like Moshe Eisenman said in Baltimore when I was in Baltimore for a while, and he said if the shul talks, if people in the shul talk, it's not the people's fault. It's the shul's fault. And he said because the davening is not really uplifting enough. And it's not interesting enough. You're not going to have people talking during an interesting movie.
Right. It depends what part they're talking over.
To me, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you the davening is supposed to be entertaining. It should be as entertaining. It should be good competition with going to a Broadway show on Friday night. If you have a question, should I go to a Broadway show on Friday night? No, the davening is more entertaining than that.
What shuls are working towards that now. I mean, they have choruses to, in some way,
absolutely. I'm very big into the chorus. I push every time I daven that I should have a choir. But I was in South Africa, and it was unbelievable. People came to shul dressed like they're going to the theater with their tuxedos Friday night. And the custom over there is the rabbi, when he speaks, he wears a talit, and it's just the
Where, Cape
ambiance is
Town?
unbelievable. No, he wears a talis when he speaks.
You were in Cape Town?
Cape Town, yeah.
So you were in the Sea Point Shul or the Garden Shul?
The Sea Point Shul and the Garden Shul. I was the guest chazan there during the day, and it was a Rosh Chodesh Elul like this year. It was Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Elul.
Awesome.
A few years ago.
I was there around 3 years ago. I think people learn the most when they hear dialogue instead of having some rabbi just give a monologue over. All right.
I don't like the word debate, because I'll tell you, like, I've seen you had a discussion with this guy Brown.
Michael Brown.
Right. Michael Brown. I mean, I've never seen any good outcome from debates. It's like Michael Brown is never gonna. You think he's ever gonna see your way?
Yeah, but it's hard to have a regular discussion when someone doesn't count you validated by God. In other words, we can disagree, and I mean, I still think that you're a kosher Jew. Like, you could think I'm a kosher Jew, but if you think that I'm going to hell and I'm like the devil incarnate, then there is no way that you can treat me like a human being. So this is why with Christians, I typically have debates. And I think when I messaged you earlier, I didn't ask you to debate me. I asked to allow me to interview you. All right. And clearly, we're going to disagree. And I love seeing when sparks fly. But elu ve'elu divrei l'chim chaim. As long as we're reaching down and grabbing something brought down by Chazal, then it's like, it's all kosher. You know what I mean? It's not like
you should look up on YouTube. My Rebbe is Reb Lev Bakst, and he's having an argument at a wedding, a real animated argument. They're yelling at each other, him and Reb Shmuel Birnbaum. The Litvish Rosh Yeshivas. No, they used to really.
It says that Hillel and Shammai, they would still marry into their own families, and so I mean, the students were killing themselves in the streets, but at least they were.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but you would say that it's proper then to proselytize, to encourage someone who's serious, like who could possibly be a great candidate for Judaism. Like, you would encourage people to convert to Judaism?
Well, you see, Hillel, it depends. I guess there are cases like that. I mean, look, Hillel, you had the converts that they didn't want to even. One didn't want to accept the oral law, which is, really, it would be considered.
Right, and he converted him also miyad. He says that fine. Like, he converted him and then he taught him.
Yeah, exactly. So, there was another rabbi, just quickly, another rabbi that's involved in the conversion I'm doing right now. And he said over the story that there was one person that he said he just couldn't give out cheeseburgers. So he just told him, all right, just keep the 7 commandments. And I said to this rabbi, I said, what would Hillel have said?
That's interesting.
Yep. Hillel would have said, okay, convert with the cheeseburgers. And then eventually he would learn and he would see that,
That's a great approach. All right. Now we'll end on that high note.